He was born with a name that was both a crown and a curse. To the world, Randall Hank Williams was the heir to a country music throne, destined to carry his father's torch. For decades, Nashville sold a fairy tale of a legendary lineage, a seamless passing of the guitar from a fallen saint to his waiting son. The story was perfect. The son rises to honor the father. The legacy continues. The music never dies. But it was just that, a story. A myth polished for public consumption, hiding a much darker and more painful reality. For most of his life, Hank Williams Jr. played the part. But now, at 76, the son is finally telling the truth about the father. And it's a story of pressure, so immense it could crack a man's soul, of pain so deep it was nearly insurmountable, and the heartbreaking lifelong cost of being haunted by a ghost you can't escape. They said he was supposed to carry the torch, but as Hank Jr. himself would later confess, nobody ever told him how to carry the weight. This is the story of what really happened when the music stopped. This is the truth. Before there was the son, there was the father. And Hank Williams Sr. wasn't just a country singer. He was an American myth, a figure carved from the very bedrock of heartache and honky-tonk, whose voice, thin, reedy, yet filled with a universe of pain, became the blueprint for modern country music. He was Hiram Hank Williams, the hillbilly Shakespeare, a man who, in a breathtakingly short career, wrote the Bible of country music, with songs like I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, Your Cheating Heart, and Lovesick Blues. His genius was meteoric, a fire that burned impossibly bright. He sold millions of records and racked up a staggering 11 number-one hits in just 6 years. He took the raw, unfiltered emotions of rural life, loneliness, infidelity, yearning, and turned them into poetry for the common man. He wasn't just singing songs. He was giving a voice to the voiceless. To his fans, he was more than a star. He was a prophet of sorrow, a jukebox saint. But every saint has a story, and Hank's was steeped in suffering. Born with spina bifida, occulta, a spinal condition that left him in chronic, debilitating pain. His existence was a constant battle. This physical agony was the dark well from which he drew his most profound songs, but it also pushed him toward the abyss. He sought relief in the bottle, drinking whiskey by age 13. And later, in a cocktail of prescription drugs to numb the pain and the pressures of fame. His personal life was just as turbulent, especially his fiery and destructive relationship with his wife Audrey Shepard Williams. Their love was the stuff of legend, a whirlwind of devotion and conflict that inspired some of his greatest heart-wrenching anthems. Audrey was ambitious and determined, acting as his manager and pushing him toward the success that would ultimately consume him. After their final divorce in 1952, a split from which he never recovered, he reportedly told her, "Audrey, I won't live another year without you." He was right. On New Year's Day, 1953, at just 29 years old, Hank Williams was found dead in the back of his baby blue Cadillac in Oak Hill, West Virginia. The official cause was heart failure, but it was a tragic cocktail of alcohol, morphine, and sedatives. His death didn't end his story. It immortalized it. It transformed Hank Williams from a troubled star into a country music martyr. He was no longer a man, but a ghost of perfect, tragic legend. And into this myth, into this cathedral of sorrow and fame, a son was born. Randall Hank Williams was not even 4 years old when his father died. He would have no real memories of the man, only the myth. And from the moment his father's heart stopped, the world looked at this little boy and saw not a child, but a replacement. With Hank Sr. gone, a massive void was left in music and in the family's finances. The pressure to fill it was immediate, and it came from the person closest to him, his mother, Audrey. Driven by a mix of grief, ambition, and a fierce will to survive, Audrey saw her son as the only way to keep the Williams name, the income. It generated live. Was it a greedy grab for cash? Or the desperate act of a mother trying to secure a future for her son in the only way she knew how? Whatever the motive, the result was the same: a childhood sacrificed at the altar of legacy. The transformation began almost immediately. At the tender age of 8, he made his debut, not as himself, but as a miniature version of the ghost that loomed over his life. He was dressed in his father's style, taught to sing his father's songs, and presented to a world hungry for any piece of the legend they had lost. A year later, he was a touring act, the star of the Audrey Williams musical Caravan of Stars. In a later interview, Hank Jr. reflected on this time, admitting, "At 8 years old, they wanted any part of him that could get back." By the time he was 14, the game was deadly serious. He was signed to his father's old label, MGM Records, and in 1964, he recorded his first single, a cover of Hank Sr.'s Long Gone Lonesome Blues. The industry machine was now fully in motion. He was being professionally packaged and sold as Hank Williams Jr., the official successor. He was no longer just honoring a memory. He was being consumed by it. This is where the most poignant quote of his life was born, a sentence that captures his entire struggle. It was fun for the little boy, to be doing Hank Williams. But it was hell for the man. The fun was ending. The applause was starting to sound less like adoration and more like a demand. The world didn't want Randall Hank, the boy who loved fishing. Hey, they wanted Hank Williams, the legend reborn. As he entered his teens, the boy began to understand the terrible weight of the clothes he was forced to wear. The hell was just beginning. As Hank Jr. entered his late teens and early 20s, the hell he spoke of became his daily reality. Being his father's stand-in had curdled into a waking nightmare. It wasn't enough to sing the songs. He was expected to be the man. He was trapped a living exhibit in a museum dedicated to his father. He was told how to walk, talk, and sing, every note compared to the ghost he was impersonating. Promoters would book him, fans would flock to see him, and then complain that he didn't sound exactly like his dad. Kay saw a flawed copy, not a young man trying to find his way. The psychological toll was immense. He was a son who was never allowed to properly grieve because he was too busy keeping his father alive through mimicry. And the pressure wasn't just to perform like his father, but to live like him. A twisted narrative began to form around him, an insidious whisper from industry insiders. Hank Sr.'s genius came from his pain. His brilliance was fueled by his alcoholism and his demons. To be as great as his father, Hank Jr. would have to walk the same tortured path. One doctor he saw after a breakdown put it bluntly: "You've been groomed to live like your father in every possible way. The only difference is he died at 29. If you don't change something, you won't make it past 26. The world wasn't just asking him to sing the blues. It was demanding he live them, right down to the self-destruction. So, Hank Jr. began to rebel in the only way that seemed to make sense. He started drinking heavily and abusing drugs, partly to cope with the pressure, and partly to live up to the family tradition everyone seemed to expect. His name, he said, gets you started real good in some ways, and it also closes the door in some other ways. It opened every door in the country, but it closed the door on him ever being his own artist. By the early 1970s, the man was screaming to get out. He started injecting his own style into his music, drawn to the raw energy of Southern rock and the blues. But the Nashville establishment resisted. He recalled how he'd start a show with a thunderous cover of Sweet Home Alabama and watch as the audience who came for your cheating heart got up and left. "There's 1,000 there and 800 left and 200 stayed," he said. Those 200 people were the beginning of his new audience, but the road there was brutal. He had to break free, or he would break completely. In 1974, he made a pivotal decision. He left Nashville, the city of ghosts, and moved to Alabama, determined to kill the copy so the real man could live. He had no idea his ultimate break would come not in a studio, but on the side of a treacherous, snow-covered mountain. August 8th, 1975. That is the date that separates the two lives of Hank Williams Jr. before this day. His struggle was for his soul. After this day, it became a battle of flesh and bone, a fight that. Around him, an insidious whisper from industry insiders. Hank Sr.'s genius came from his pain. His brilliance was fueled by his alcoholism and his demons. To be as great as his father, Hank Jr. would have to walk the same tortured path. One doctor he saw after a breakdown put it bluntly, "You've been groomed to live like your father in every possible way. The only difference is he died at 29. If you don't change something, you won't make it past 26. The world wasn't just asking him to sing the blues. 'Twas demanding he live them right down to the self-destruction. So, Hank Jr. began to rebel in the only way that seemed to make sense. He started drinking heavily and abusing drugs, partly to cope with the pressure and partly to live up to the family tradition everyone seemed to expect. His name, he said, gets you started real good in some ways, and it also closes the door in some other ways. It opened every door in the country, but it closed the door on him ever being his own artist. By the early 1970s, the man was screaming to get out. He started injecting his own style into his music, drawn to the raw energy of Southern rock and the blues. But the Nashville establishment resisted. He recalled how he'd start a show with a thunderous cover of Sweet Home Alabama and watch as the audience who came for Your Cheating Heart got up and left. "There's 1,000 there and 800 left and 200 stayed," he said. Those 200 people were the beginning of his new audience, but the road there was brutal. He had to break free or he would break completely. In 1974, he made a pivotal decision. He left Nashville, the city of ghosts, and moved to Alabama, determined to kill the copy so the real man could live. He had no idea his ultimate break would come not in a studio, but on the side of a treacherous, snow-covered mountain. August 8th, 1975. That is the date that separates the two lives of Hank Williams Jr. before this day. His struggle was for his soul. After this day, it became a battle of flesh and bone, a fight that would, against all odds, finally set him free. Seeking a moment of peace, Hank Jr. was hiking with a friend on Ajax Peak in Montana. At around 9,000 feet, he stepped onto a snowfield. Without warning, the snow gave way. He didn't just stumble. He plunged nearly 500 feet down the mountainside, his body slamming against rocks before he landed face first on a massive boulder. The damage was catastrophic. In his autobiography, Living Proof, he recalled the gruesome moments. "I put my teeth, hands up to feel my nose. Where my nose should be, there's nothing there. My teeth and parts of my jaw fall out in my hand." His skull was fractured in multiple places, his face shattered, and his brain was literally exposed. A doctor who worked on him, a Vietnam vet, said the soldiers he'd treated looked good compared to me. He should have died. But miraculously, he was alive. After a long and arduous helicopter rescue, he woke up in the hospital to see his godmother, June Carter Cash, and her husband, Johnny Cash. The road ahead was unimaginably painful. He spent the next 2 years undergoing 9 grueling reconstructive surgeries. They had to completely rebuild his face, and doctors warned him he might never sing again. The physical transformation was profound. To hide the deep scars and disfigurement, Hank Jr. grew a thick beard and started wearing dark sunglasses and a cowboy hat. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was a necessity. But in doing so, he accidentally created an iconic new persona. The clean-shaven face of Hank Williams' son was gone, shattered on that boulder. In its place was a rugged, mysterious, an intimidating figure, a man who had stared death in the face and survived. The fall was more than an accident. It was a baptism by fire. It was a literal breaking of the man he was forced to be. The face that was a copy of his father's legacy was destroyed. In the silence and pain of his recovery, he finally had the chance to decide who he was going to be. He had survived the fall. Now, he would survive the legacy. While still recovering, Hank Jr. released an album recorded just before the accident. Its title was Prophetic: Hank Williams Jr. and Friends. It was his first true declaration of artistic independence, a fusion of country roots with Southern rock and blues. It was the sound of a man breaking free. When he finally emerged, bearded and behind sunglasses, he was no longer asking for permission. The fall had stripped away any desire to please the Nashville establishment. He now had his own story to tell, one of survival, defiance, and rebirth. And he was going to tell it his way. The music that followed was a sonic boom. He unleashed a string of albums that were raw, autobiographical, and unapologetically his. He addressed his past head-on in family tradition, cheekily justifying his hard partying ways while carving out his own identity. "If I get stoned and sing all night long," he sang, "it's a family tradition." He was acknowledging the legacy while claiming his own rebellion. He wrote about his near-death experience in songs like Living Proof, but it was a country boy can survive that cemented his new persona. It was a rugged ode to self-reliance, an anthem for millions. Hits like Whiskey Bent and Hellbound and All My Rowdy Friends Have Settled Down chronicled his journey. Blending hell-raising with introspection, he had finally found his voice, and the world responded. It's the same Nashville that once resisted him now couldn't deny his power. He became one of the biggest stars in country musical legend in his own right. He won Entertainer of the Year from both the CMA and ACM in 1987 and 1988. His new theme for Monday Night Football, a rework of his own All My Rowdy Friends Are Coming Over Tonight, became a cultural touchstone, earning him for Emmys. Perhaps the most symbolic moment came in 1989, using modern technology. He recorded a duet of his father's song, There's a Tear in My Beer. He wasn't just covering his father anymore. He was singing with him, an equal partner across time. The recording won a Grammy, a poignant symbol of a son no longer in his father's shadow, but standing shoulder to shoulder with his legacy. This journey from pressure to peace, from copy to icon, is one of the most powerful stories in music history. For more untold stories of the rebels and survivors who changed country music, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a chapter of this incredible history at 76 years old. Hank Williams Jr. is a man who seems to have finally made peace with the ghost that haunted him. The anger that fueled his rebirth has softened into a quiet understanding. The man who once saw his name as a burden now sees it as a complex blessing. He no longer competes with his father's legend. He simply lives with it, a son at ease with his inheritance. "You all love him because he died young," he once said, "but I had to live with what he left behind." He spoke of being angry that his father left, angry that everyone wanted him to be his father, angry that he had to navigate life without a dad, with only stories and shadows for a blueprint. But then a shift occurred. He started reading old letters his father had written, and in those private words he found not a myth, but a man struggling with depression, confusion, and the feeling of being lost. He was just a man, Hank Jr. concluded. He hurt. He broke. He tried. In seeing his father's humanity, he was finally able to stop running from the ghost. Now, when he performs his father's songs, it's not out of obligation, but connection. The legacy continues, but the cycle of pain is broken. The Williams name is now carried by his children Holly, Hillary, Sam, and Hank Williams III, his grandson, Coleman Williams, all navigating that name in their own way. They honor the family, which also includes Hank Jr.'s late daughter, Catherine. But they have a different roadmap, thanks to their father. He proved that you don't have to be a copy to honor your heritage. The story of Hank Williams Jr. isn't just about surviving a father's legacy. It's the story of surviving the crushing weight of expectation. a nearly 500-foot fall, and the demons that came with his name. He didn't just step out from under a shadow. He learned to cast his own, one just as long and just as legendary. The son of country music's greatest icon is no longer defined by his father's tragedy. He is defined by his own triumphant story of unbelievable resilience.